You ever have one of those days where you're just minding your own business, trying to keep your head down, and then life just grabs you by the collar and drags you into something bigger than you ever planned? That's what happened to Tommy Callahan, a guy who thought he knew the quiet rhythm of his days in Willow Creek, a small town tucked away in the Midwest where the loudest thing is usually the diner's coffee machine at 6 a.m. But one night, one choice, turned this grease-stained mechanic into something else entirely, a name people would whisper with respect, a story that would ripple out like a stone dropped in a still pond. Tommy was barely holding it together, still sore from a surgery that left him with a fresh scar across his side, when he limped into St. Mary's Hospital for a checkup. He's the kind of guy who doesn't make a fuss ex-army, seen his share of hard days, now fixing motorcycles in a garage under his tiny apartment, the kind of place where the rent's cheap and the walls are thin. He liked it that way, keeping life small, simple, just him and his tools, maybe some Springsteen humming low on the radio. War had taught him to move carefully, to measure his words like he measured torque, to never walk past someone who needed a hand. That's why, when he overheard the nurse's frantic whispers about a little girl bleeding out in the ER, something in him shifted before he could even think it through. Her name was Mia, 9 years old, caught in a wreck when some drunk idiot ran a red light on Highway 12. The hospital was out of her rare blood type AB negative, the kind you don't just keep on the shelf. Without it, she had maybe an hour, probably less. Tommy, leaning against the counter, still wincing from his stitches, caught the words, "no supply," and calling the city. He knew that look on the nurses' faces, the kind that says time's running out faster than hope. And then he said it, calm as if he was ordering coffee. "I'm AB negative." The nurse spun around, eyes wide like she'd just seen a ghost. "You're post-op," she said. "It's not safe." Tommy just shrugged. "Hook me up. Now, picture this. Tommy, pale as the hospital tiles, sitting in a donation chair, the needle biting into his arm, watching his blood snake through a tube to a bag that's going to be rushed to a kid he's never met. His head's spinning, his stitches aching, but he's locked in, thinking about how fragile it all is on wrong turn. One empty blood bank, one stranger who says yes. The nurses kept checking on him, saying things like, "You sure you're okay? And you don't have to do this." But Tommy just nodded, "Keep going." When they finally pulled the needle, he was lightheaded, barely able to sit up straight. But they said it was enough to give Mia a shot. That was all he needed to hear. Mission done, right? He figured he'd slip out, go home, crack a beer, and forget the whole thing. But life, man, it had other plans. As Tommy slumped in a plastic chair, trying to shake the fog in his head, a low rumble started outside, like thunder creeping in slow. It grew louder, shaking the windows, rattling the glass doors until it felt like the whole hospital was humming. He looked up, and through the doors, he saw it headlights slicing through the dark, chrome glinting like a promise. 50, maybe 60 motorcycles rolled into the lot, engines roaring in unison, each one carrying a rider in a black leather vest, patches stitched proud across their backs. Iron Reapers, the kind of crew that makes people cross the street. Tommy knew the sound of a Harley, worked on enough of them, but this was something else, a wave of power, disciplined, deliberate, like a battalion moving in. The man leading them was Vince, Mia's uncle, a guy Tommy had seen pacing the ER hallway earlier, his leather vest worn like a second skin. Back then, Vince was just a worried uncle, eyes red, fists clenched, helpless as his niece fought for her life. Now, he walked with purpose, the kind of stride that says he owns the ground he's on. The doors slid open, and the Reapers filed in, boots heavy on the tile, not loud, not chaotic, but like they were guarding something sacred. Nurses froze. The security guard's hand hovered over his radio but didn't touch it. Vince crossed the room straight to Tommy, who was still trying to figure out what the hell was happening. "You're the guy," Vince said, not asking, just stating, his voice low, like he was sizing up a man he'd just met but already owed. Tommy nodded. "Yeah, I guess." Vince's jaw tightened. "Her name's Mia. My sister's kid. You didn't have to do that." Tommy just looked at him. "Yeah, I did." What happened next wasn't just a moment, it was a shift, like the ground moving under your feet. Vince turned to the Reapers, maybe 40 of them now crowding the hallway, and said, "This is Tommy Callahan. He bled for my family when he didn't have to." A murmur rippled through the group, not loud, but heavy, like they were all measuring the weight of what he'd done. Vince leaned in. Come with me. She should see you. Tommy wanted to say no, to slip back into the shadows where he was comfortable, but something in Vince's eyes, gratitude, respect, maybe something deeper, pulled him to his feet. They walked to Mia's room, the Reapers parting like a tide, their stares following him, not hostile, but curious, like they were trying to figure out what kind of man does this. In the room, Mia looked tiny, swallowed by the hospital bed, tubes and wires framing her like a fragile painting. Her eyes fluttered open, catching Tommy's shadow in the doorway. He stepped closer, feeling out of place, like he was intruding on something private. Hey kid, he said, voice soft, you gave us a scare. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, and she whispered, are you the one? Tommy nodded, guess so. You just keep fighting, all right? You've got a lot of road left. He leaned in, just for her to hear. You're gonna get up, and when you do, you make it count, deal? She gave a tiny nod, her hand brushing his before her eyes closed again, like she'd used up all her strength just to say that much. Tommy stepped back, feeling Vince's eyes on him, heavy with something unspoken. She's alive because of you, Vince said, and Tommy shook his head. She's alive because you got her here. But Vince wasn't having it. We don't forget this, Tommy. Not ever. Back in the hallway, the Reapers were still there, a wall of leather and steel, and one of them, a big guy with a shaved head and a nomad patch, stepped up. You bled for one of ours, he said, voice like gravel. That makes you part of this now, like it or not. Tommy didn't know what this was, but he felt it, the weight of their loyalty, like a current pulling him in. Vince clapped a hand on his shoulder. We're getting you home. Tommy tried to wave it off. I'm fine, really. But Vince just handed him a helmet. It's not about fine. It's about respect. And just like that, Tommy was on the back of Vince's Harley, the night air sharp against his face, the roar of 40 bikes behind him swallowing the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Storefronts lit up in their chrome. People stepped out of bars to stare, phones raised to catch the sight of the Iron Reapers riding in formation, escorting a nobody mechanic like he was one of their own. By morning, the story was already spreading. A nurse's photo of the bikes lined up outside the ER hit the internet, racking up thousands of shares. Local news ran it. Veteran saves girl's life, bikers honor him. Tommy hated the attention, felt it like a spotlight he didn't ask for, but it kept coming. Customers at the garage started showing up with coffee, homemade pies, even a kid's drawing of a motorcycle with, "Thank you," Tommy scrawled in crayon. His phone buzzed with messages from old army buddies, strangers, even a high school teacher who brought her class to interview him for a project. "Why'd you do it?" one kid asked, pencil hovering. Tommy thought for a second. Because she needed help, and I could give it. You don't wait for a reason when it's the right thing to do. That quote ended up on the front page of the Willow Creek Gazette, shared across social media like wildfire. The ripple effect was real. The blood bank saw donations spike 300% in a month. The hospital set up a donor day in Mia's name, and people came from miles away, some in biker vests, others in work boots, all because of one night. Mia got stronger, her mom thanking Tommy every time he visited, her eyes wet with gratitude he didn't know how to handle. Vince and the Reapers kept showing up at the garage, not just to check in, but to make sure Tommy knew he wasn't alone anymore. Then came the big move. Vince invited him to a Reapers meeting, and Tommy expected a smoky room, a few guys around a table. Instead, he walked into a clubhouse glowing with warm light, the air thick with coffee and oil, and at the head of the room was Frank, Vince's dad, the Reapers' president, a man with eyes like steel and a presence that filled the space. "This him?" Frank asked, standing slow, like a general inspecting a soldier. Vince nodded. "This is Tommy Callahan." Frank crossed the room, every eye on him, and said, "I don't do gratitude easy, but you saved my granddaughter. That makes you blood." He handed Tommy a patch, black leather with white stitching, iron bond. "It's new," Frank said, "because of you. A roster for people riders, civilians, doesn't matter who step up when it counts. Blood, money, protection, whatever's needed." Tommy held the patch, feeling its weight, realizing this wasn't just a gesture, it was a new kind of family, built on what he'd done. Weeks later, the Reapers organized a charity ride for the hospital's trauma unit, and they wanted Tommy to lead. He tried to duck it. I'm no hero, but Vince just grinned. You don't get to decide that. The day came, and Main Street was lined with bikes over 100, reapers mixed with other clubs, even solo riders who'd heard the story. Townsfolk waved. Kids held signs. Thank you, Tommy. He rode at the front, Vince on his left, Frank on his right, the thunder of engines shaking the air. They passed Mia, standing with her mom, waving like she was part of the parade. Tommy gave her a salute, and her grin lit up the street. At the hospital, they handed over a check big enough to buy new equipment, and Tommy, against his better judgment, took the mic. I'm no hero, he said, voice steady. But if this shows you anything, it's that we can all be the guy who steps up when it counts. The crowd roared, not like a concert, but like they meant it, like they'd carry that with them. Life didn't go back to normal after that. Tommy's garage was busier, not just with bikes, but with people riders, neighbors, strangers who wanted to shake his hand. The iron bond grew, a network of doers, not talkers, ready to help when the call came. And every so often, a Harley's rumble would roll by his place, a reminder that he was part of something now, whether he liked it or not. But the real kicker came a month later, when Vince showed up at the garage, no vest, just a flannel shirt, leaning against the door. You need to know something, he said, about why that night hit us so hard. Tommy raised an eyebrow, waiting. Frank, my dad, he's old school. Doesn't trust anyone outside the club, barely trusts us half the time. But you? You didn't just save Mia. You broke through a wall he's been building for decades. That's why you're family now. Tommy didn't say much, just nodded, but it sank in deep. He'd walked into that hospital a loner, a guy who fixed bikes and kept his scars hidden. He walked out tied to a brotherhood, a town, a little girl who'd grow up because he said yes. And that's the thing about life, it doesn't care about your plans. It puts you in a moment, asks you to choose, and sometimes that choice changes everything. So, what would you do if you were Tommy that night, hearing a kid needed you, knowing it might cost you? Drop it in the comments. Let's see what you'd choose when the stakes are high and the clock's ticking. If this story hit you, if it made you think about what makes a community, hit that like button, subscribe to True Grit Tales, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, one act, one moment, can remind us all what it means to stand up when it counts.